pause for meditative thought to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is held in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. The news media has been notified, and a copy of the agenda has been made available to the public. The meeting is open to the public. The public is invited to attend in person at all times. All persons wishing to attend the meeting by virtual means may do so via YouTube, Sumter School District Board meetings, and Sumter School District's Facebook page. The vision for our district is the Sumter School District is committed to educating, empowering, and enriching the lives of all students to reach their full potential. Our mission, Sumter School District is committed to providing a safe, nurturing, and high-quality educational environment that supports diversity and equips students for local and global success. Members of the board include Bonnie Disney, Area 9 Vice Chair, Sean T. Reagan, Clerk, Sherry White, Parliamentarian, Daniel Palumbo, Brittany English, Tara Kaiser Johnson, Matthew McLeod, Jeff Zell, Deborah McQueen, who represents the military Shore Air Force Base. I'm Ralph Canny, Service Chair, and our Superintendent is Dr. William T. Wright, Jr., and our Administrative Manager to the Superintendent and the Board is Ms. Shantae Scott, and our CFO and presenter tonight is Mrs. Spellman. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. The agenda is before us for approval. What is your pleasure? Hearing none, meaning consensus, the agenda will stand approved. Item 3, Office of Superintendent.
Mr. Chair, members of the Board of Trustees, in just a few seconds, we will be presenting the second and final reading of the fiscal year 24-25 budget. That presentation will be done by our Chief Finance Officer, Mrs. Shatika Spearman. At the conclusion of that, if there are any questions, we'll try our best to answer those. And looking for a second and final reading tonight, Mr. Chair, members of the Board of Trustees.
To everyone, I will start with our budget priorities. I always like to get that in my mind before I speak or present, so that it will continue to serve as our guiding force. We have 6 major priorities for our fiscal year 24-25 budget. Those include professional development focus, facility improvements, mental health supports, nurses, continuously recruiting and retaining high-performing workforce, post-ESSER operations, and leveraging fund balance. The next sheet shows the 2025 expenditure projections. As you recall, on Monday, when this body met, you did approve 5 new positions for the new year. And so that is a change that was presented at the council meeting because that was approved Monday. So I presented it as part of our expenditures for the council meeting. And it does appear with us today. On the sheet, FY25 projected expenditures, we still have the mandate or state and district for our teacher salary and all those salaries in that category that correspond from the salary study and the increased amount for teacher salary. We have the bus driver proposed 2.75% increase on the state portion. Bus monitors, we wanted to carry them to $11 an hour. We have a step increase for all other staff in order to maintain salaries and not get behind the number of steps that we had in the past. And then you see the new line of new org chart, 5 new positions, $776,537. That is the new addition to this. Another cost of AP for Willow Drive, homebound and virtual teacher contract services. That would be through a third party. The next sheet, we have the contract nurses, formerly funded by ESSER, $500,000. We expect an increase in audit services. We expect an increase in insurance premiums. We expect an increase in security. We also wanted to allot funds for professional development and then academic software that was previously paid by ESSER. So our total projected general fund expenditure increase for the year FY25 is $10,783,684. And that still remains true as of today. Our revenue projections for FY25. Our millage estimate still remains the same. We are set at 159.4 operating mills. The value remains at $197,393 per meal. We're expecting $31,464,000 in estimated ad valorem taxes. The next slide still shows what our projected enrollment is. And then the next slide is the House and Senate amounts for the additional funding that we began our budget process by from the estimates from Department of Ed by district on what portion we would receive under each of the scenarios. And there has been a change to our estimates regarding that, so I will talk about that shortly. For the projected local revenue, as we expected, the increase was $874,000 more that we will expect to receive next year. Our interest on investments, our bond investments, is still doing so well. We estimate $1,500,000 in additional revenue based on the budget, and these numbers are comparing to the budgeted number. Our school bus driver salary is set at $38,236 for the increase. We will get a health insurance allotment to help with that at $1.7 million. Retiree insurance is expected to be increased for allocation at $496,000. The next category, state aid to classrooms. After reviewing our information and our data, I do not expect a true increase of 1.8 as the Department of Ed has determined. And I determined that because based on the budget that was approved for FY24 and that estimate at that time, that is what is on our books for budget. That number is high. And so to not overstate revenue, as you recall, on Monday I presented the revenue, and we're at a $5.6 million deficit based on what the revenue is expected to be. That means that back a year ago, when we were getting the numbers together, we had an estimate of $88.4 million for state aid to classrooms. And now to this day, after the numbers have done at the 45th day, the 135th day, That amount is now only expected to be 82,778,000, and that leaves a difference of 5.6 million. That number has sat there the whole year because the numbers are in and they don't expect to do any more adjustments to the FY24. So in doing that, we do a base budget where we use FY24 as our base and we add increases and adjustments to it. So I do not recommend us increasing that increase that is out there for the Department of Ed to the tune of $1.8 million. Are there any questions regarding that estimate?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I do have a quick question on that one. So, because we did not get last year what we thought we would get, this year, having been promised, we are not going to expect. And then if we get an increase, then that'll be great. Is
It
that
will
what
be.
you're saying?
Yes,
Right
ma'am.
now, we're just budgeting that there will be no increase. We will receive the same thing we did last year.
That is correct, because the increase out there on the Department of Ed is the increase above what we actually get.
Right.
So there will be an increase, but our budgeted number from the last year this time was a high estimate. And we went with the best estimate at that time. And so now to increase it by another 1.8 would be too much. And so I recommend we do not increase it by that amount.
Don't count on that money.
That's right.
Gotcha.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I have a question regarding school bus driver salary. The 38,236, is that an increase because of anticipated additional drivers or just an increase in salaries for our current bus drivers?
Yes, they do get a small increase, but because of the level of their, what they get paid, increases are very small. But that is an increase that we will receive from the state, and it's on the Department of Ed website to show that.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we were comfortable. But of course, as your CFO, I have a solution to this difference in revenue. So for that section of projected state revenue, we have 2.296 expected for that section of projected state revenue. The next, or the third part of our state revenue, is our property tax relief tier 3. This is a stable number that we can rest assured on. We get a document from the Department of Revenue, and that is a stable number, so we would expect $1.2 million more than what is on our books. And this year, of course, that is revenue that we will not receive until the end of the year. We're set to receive $17.9 million. Hopefully, it'll be coming in any moment now, but we are set to get over $19 million for that for next year, and that is in a document from that agency. Also, on our next slide, we are expecting an indirect cost reduction by ESSER, because ESSER will sunset. We will not be able to claim, we estimate, up to $350,000 in revenue that we were before. So our FY 2025 projected general fund increase revenue is estimated at $5.6 million. The next slide shows that there is a shortfall to the tune of $5.178 million. When we put a budget together, the first step we do is we look at what all the estimates are for the fiscal year that we're entering into. But at the same time, we have to also look at what our current budget base is. As you've heard me say in my previous presentations, FY24's budget of $158,311,255 remains as our base, and we naturally will add to that on the revenue and expenditure sides. However, we have now conducted those, we have now looked at our current base budget to see if any changes need to be made to the base budget. And these are the changes that I recommend that we bring before you. because of where we are as far as payroll, as far as monthly expenses. So we've sat down and looked at that and what we expect to make, what we expect to receive and what we expect to pay out. Again, you know that we have payrolls that go into accrual for the 2 months after the fiscal year ends, and so we have included those in our estimate. So as we talk about these expenditure line reductions from our base budget, you can refer to the second page of the back page of the document that shows the expenditure categories, and you will see where I have deducted those amounts from that. So we'll start with the substitute salaries, non-Kelly services. This is mainly what we pay our those people who we have to make accommodations for to get students to school. And we spent a considerably lower amount, so we expect to have a $25,000 reduction for that. Every year when we do our insurance estimate, we always seek PEBA's guidance, and they always give us an estimate that they predict for the entire state. And we use that and increase it. Every year, this district has increased it by that amount. And so based on what we're expecting for the end of this fiscal year, we expect that the current budget of $13.4 million, we will spend $1.5 million less than that for the FY24 base year. And so that amount is now become a savings for our base. Employee retirement, again, by doing the percentage-based method at 24.91%, we estimate that currently where we are now, we will spend $300,000 less on our base budget for FY24. 260 is unemployment compensation. We expect a reduction of $50,000. 315 is our management services line where we do the drug testing services for our district, and we spend a considerably less amount. And we estimate a $10,000 reduction in that. Data processing services, a reduction of $15,000 for our base year. Legal services, a reduction of $30,000. And when we reduce these budgets, we allot monies to still make it through the end of the year, even though the end of the year is technically 2 weeks away. Repairs and maintenance, we estimate a $158,000 reduction based on FY24 levels. Pupil transportation, $28,136. Our communications area, a reduction of $25,000. For advertising, we expect a $10,000 reduction. Miscellaneous purchase services, an $87,778 reduction. And a lot of this was related to our Cognia and other items that we did that we won't be doing next year. For supplies, again, this is a good number because we always cut off the purchase orders on April 30th of each year. And so we tell each school and department that you can't create any more purchase orders and you need to plan throughout the year for those things at the end of the year. And so by us having a proper cutoff process, we're able to end a bunch of our expenditures so that we can get a better estimate on what we're going to end up by the year. So purchases have pretty much stopped since April 30th. So based on that and the current budget that we have, we estimate a $200,000 reduction for that on our base year. Periodicals, $710 reduction. Technology and software supplies, $22,400 reduction. Our energy, we have looked through every line of our energy and we noticed that we expect to spend $525,000 less this base year. For whatever reason, energy has not increased as much as we projected and we were told. Redemption of principal. This is where we go and pay those liabilities for the general fund that are on our financial statements. And one of those expenditures is the energy loan that we have. And that amount is about to be paid off. And so we estimate a $330,000 reduction. If you look at the financial statements and the schedule for payments, those payments get smaller and smaller as we make those payments. And the related interest to that, we estimate a $99,000 reduction. Insurance and judgments, we estimate about a $58,000 reduction. So by combing through the FY24 base year, we have identified reductions of $3.4 million. And at the same time, we have to look at those things that maybe budget wasn't enough. Maybe the estimate, maybe the actual was more than the estimate, and we do truly expect to experience higher levels, and that these expenditures for FY24 are now at a new base level. Those items, of course, as you identified at the board meeting on Monday, were the overtime salaries for $800,000. So we estimate that that needs to be a new base amount for FY24. Statistical services, this is the area where we pay for our assessments. That's $1,198 more that would be need for our FY24 base. Cleaning, Kelly Services building work, it appears that we will continue to utilize them because of our need for additional cleaning workers. $70,000 is what we estimate. Rentals, $138,837. Printing and binding, another $1,800. Library books, there has been a need for our media specialists to purchase, and ESSER also currently has an amount for that. So we have $14,000 that we expect to use as a new base for FY24. Dues and fees, another $1,393 to increase to our new base year for FY24. Pupil activity, another $200,000 is needed to get up to what our base for FY24 needs to be. And the fund modifications, these are transfers between the general fund and another fund where we have shared expenditures. We estimate an increase of $100,000 for that area. And so at the same time that we saw reductions, we saw increases that are needed for our base year to the tune of 1.3. In this case, the reductions exceed the additions.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Ms. Spearman, on line 325 rentals, what do we rent? Just in general,
In really a lot of the services, maybe the translation services, those are type of
That falls
services that
under
we
that.
that we
Okay.
don't receive like an item or good for,
Right.
and that we would service. for
okay,
that.
so it's not like rental buildings and stuff like that.
Well, no, because we do that as a revenue producing activity at the
Right.
top,
Okay.
but yes,
All right, that's what
but
confused
we
me,
don't
but I
normally rent.
understand now.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
don't normally rent.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I have a question. Ms. Spearman, I know we had some conversation about, well, probably last year, you made it very clear that the budget was developed by the superintendent's goals. I didn't quite understood that for this year. Were there any goals developed from the superintendent this year that drove this budget?
Yeah, I start with his priorities, or I guess you could call them goals.
Okay, so
Those
those were the
6.
priorities. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so on the reduction side of things, and maybe you can help me understand, one of the priorities, does it talk about the improvements of facilities?
Yes, that is
Okay.
one of them.
All right, so the reduction in line 323,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's over $100,000 that we're taking away from repairs and maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
So can you kind of explain to me?
Well, that is to adjust the FY24 base year on what we expect to spend for this year. And so we've identified about that much that we won't have to utilize. But again, as you relate that to the priority, I see what you're saying, that no reduction maybe should be taken for that. But I'm looking strictly at the numbers and what we expect to end for FY24. So that is what my thinking was headed.
Right, and certainly I understand that. However, you know, you don't think that we could kind of use it before, or go ahead and place it somewhere before the year ends instead of, you know, I mean,
That is
there's
an
several
option that,
things that we do know. I mean, we may be getting new furniture in schools, but, you know, the buildings itself
right.
probably still need some upfitting. So, I mean, I just had a little, you know, I was just a little taken back by looking at that, knowing that superintendent's priorities
Right.
kind of specify buildings
Okay.
and maintenance improvement.
I see that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Mr. Reagan, Dr. Reagan. I was going to ask about that same thing, and I don't think that it should be a reduction as I
Okay.
think about the fact that there were things that were not addressed this year.
Okay.
There were several items that were not addressed this year and called out as not having been addressed, and these are dollars that probably would have gone towards those. So you would know better than we would, but I do think that those things need to be taken into consideration, be it before the end of the year or once we move into the new year.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I actually agree with that too, because facilities are such a priority.
Yep.
I agree that maybe that should be a reduction.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
for just a moment, help me focus on 430 library books. And I know we're talking about an increase. We've sat with many librarian meetings, and every school has a library. Is there a figure of what we contribute to these libraries yearly? This is only an increase, and I'm not sure how that fund came up, that amount. But how much are we spending to help these libraries? Because they told us some terrible stories about how they need, their many needs.
Well, right now, there is about $100,000 allocated out of ESSER for them to use at the beginning of the year next year. And currently in the general fund, there is a line item where we budgeted $94,094, and there currently has been a spend of $110,000 for library books. That is code 430 on the revenue and expenditure report that I presented on Monday. So we've exceeded that, and that is kind of why they've contacted me as well as what their needs are. So that's why I identified that as an increase.
Okay, and you said the ESSER funds are how much?
We have $100,000 allocated for all schools to utilize.
For all of us?
Well, the total is $100,000.
Yeah, I got it.
Yes, yes.
So, tell me again how you came up with 14,906.
It's an estimate because we have a budget of 94 and we're already at 110.
Okay.
And so that was just an estimate, best guess, that's more money we would need on top of the 94 for next year.
In your opinion, when you talk to the librarians, media specialists, are they pleased with what we're doing to?
They told me they're grateful for anything that we can give them. So they made that a need and identified that and put that in front of me.
Mr. Chair, if I might talk a little bit about that. Madam Vice Chair and other members of the Board of Trustees, we met with the entire media staff right after you guys got on the board, and we talked about that. And so we understand that, particularly over the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to have to make some major investments. Our library age, which is the way that they kind of calculate media books and so forth, is we're a little bit behind. I'll just say it that way publicly. But we understand that we need to address that for sure, and thank you for keeping that in front of us. It's going to take us a few years to get to where we need to be because there was not much attention to that at times. So we understand that as we're doing all these other things, quality of books, and then you have to, there's a lot of language about whether or not to purchase physical books or e-books and things of that nature that we're looking into. But
They were talking about desks and tables.
sure, we've got some of those issues too. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for
Yes,
addressing
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We'll continue to work on that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I got something. And I remember having the meetings with the librarians and if I remember correctly, I don't know if we got a follow-up on it, was, because if I remember correctly, each school got to choose, and I'm fine with that, to choose what books they want to purchase, but it was more probably expensive than putting under one to get, because 3 or 4 schools may want the same books. So it'd be the cost would cut down because you're buying in multiples. Where are we on that as in, because I thought we were going into that to have where they can have a mass purchase to be cheaper to the school district.
We can certainly follow up on that, but the challenge with that is the diversity of the schools that we have. And so you could do some combination stuff at the high school level because of the size of our high schools. When you start talking about books at the elementary and middle level, it's really a little bit more difficult to bulk it. We'll do that where we can, but because of curriculum responsibilities and trying to match material up with, it's a little bit more difficult the lower the grade to bulk. But we'll look at that where we can for sure.
Okay. And and this is more on the budget side, and I think I understand what you're talking about. You're looking at your trends from the past years back, and you're seeing a new trend, and this is where, keep in mind, board members, these are not solid, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Spearman, for example, is say a reduction in insurance is 1.5 in reduction. That is just a trend what the district is on. It doesn't mean that that's the budget. She's allowed to move the money around to meet. So what she's trying to explain to you is that's just a trend what she's seeing out there. So don't think it's solid numbers where that is my budget and I got to stick to it. She's allowed to move the money around to meet, to make sure she has enough money in those accounts. But what she's trying to explain to you, there's reductions that she's seen over the past years that she is confident to say, hey, this is what's going on, that I actually have money because it's actually going down, or in the reverse, and these other ones are going up. So don't make your heads wrap around that, hey, this is solid numbers. They're not. They're very fluid. Am I correct?
You are so correct.
Thank you.
That's it. That is correct, because you don't know what's going to happen next year. You have no idea.
So like I know you guys are on the maintenance side of things. All she's trying to explain to you is there's been a trend in the Sumter School District of maintenance has been going lower. What that cause of that, I don't know, because we need maintenance stuff. But it doesn't mean she's taking money away from there. She's not saying that. She's just saying that's the trend that's been going on. For example, my question to you is more on the energy.
Yes.
From the expertise, what do they think that's for? Is it we're doing educational to the schools and saying shut down the lights? Because that's a lot of money. I mean, that's a lot of shutting down lights. But or is it our equipment better? Is it saving energy? Or do you know? Do they give you a
I don't
reason?
know, but that is something that me and Mr. Myers need to have a conversation about, because that increase was the increase that we expected that we got from our vendors for last year's budget to get to the 24 numbers. And so based on where we are and how much more time we have left in the year to pay the bill, this is what the best guess is. So it definitely starts to ask why.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. That's a huge reduction
It
that you're
is.
seeing a trend.
Yes.
This is an ongoing trend. That's a great thing.
Because we
but-
were told it was going to increase.
Correct.
That's what we were told last year.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying is why is
Yes.
the question.
Yep, that's right. Now
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, to build on the energy line, do those rebates come into play there? Are they taken into consideration in that dollar
do.
amount?
We code it as a reimbursement of expenditure, and so yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
of that 525, any rebates would
Well, the
there.
525 is the amount of reduction.
Reductions, yeah.
But the budget is actually 4.9 million. And so we estimate to spend 4.4 million is what that is saying. And in that expenditures, we do include those credits.
Okay.
And
all
right now, today, we are at a $3.6 million spend. And so that says we have about $1.3 million more to spend for the next month. That's not realistic, so that's
Yeah.
not what we've been spending.
And
And
plus.
so that's why I
school
did that reduction.
Yeah. Okay, and then I also, and I apologize that I missed this when you were going through it, line item 340 and line item 350, communication was one line, advertising the other. What was the rationale behind those?
Now, the advertising that I do remember, that was, I believe, no, the communication, that was a bigger reduction. I believe that we had started to say that we were going to do the printing for the manuals at the start of the year, the new, I guess, the code of conduct, I believe.
Okay,
And so we were able to do a significant savings on what we expected, what that guesstimate was, and then our usage as of today versus the rest of the year. And so that is what that is: communication, advertising. We did the advertising that we have are basically two lines, and one of those lines is when I advertise for the public hearing that we have for the budget, and that's normally about $500 to $600. And then we have some miscellaneous advertising, and we only came up with another $8. And so for this year, 350 is budgeted at $20,500 is the FY24 budget, and we've only spent, what's that, 350? We've only spent $4,333.
okay, so line item 350 has nothing to do with recruiting.
Oh,
Efforts.
HR has some expenditures in that, but very minimal here.
Okay.
Because I think they have another funding source
Gotcha.
that they utilize.
And then that communications piece has nothing to do with what Ms. Galloway is doing from a communications perspective.
Correct.
Okay, okay. And lastly, the other piece was line item 120, the non-Kelly services.
Yes.
What did you say that is again?
The non-Kelly services were the substitutes that we have on our payroll. That would be receptionist subs. I believe there's some food service subs. I think maybe before we put some of them on Kelly, but beginning of last year, anybody that's not served by Kelly and requires a sub, we provide that. And so that's been receptionist, that's been, I think, food service, maybe some maintenance as well. So that's what we kind of do that, and that's a very minimal amount. We have a budget of $100,000, and we've only spent $50,000.
Okay, and food services would be included there. I know you said on Monday that it's basically self-sustaining, but that part of it will come out of the
Exactly,
district
exactly,
budget. Okay,
yes.
thank you.
I have one more question, Mr. Chair. Ms. Spearman, Ms. Johnson just asked about, I think, line 340.
340?
Yeah, as they deal with communications.
Yes.
You stated that that does not have to do with Ms. Galloway's department.
That is services for communication, such as mobile services, that type of thing.
Okay. Can you explain what that is?
Cell phone,
Okay.
cell phone services, anything with IT that has that communication piece, but it's nothing dedicated to the communications director.
Okay.
IT.
Okay.
'Cause
So
that-
it falls under technology.
Yes, and it's identified as a 340 code, and we had a budget of $370,000 for FY24. We've only spent $289,000 as of today.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Okay. An example of an expenditure out of that account might be if we were going to purchase new radios for schools or something like that. That would be a communication. Is that right?
Yes,
That'd
that's
be a
correct.
line item for that.
Yes.
Okay.
So whenever we, I apologize, but whenever we think about whenever we think about the buses and the mounting systems that we talked about on Monday, would that come out of that, or would it be something different?
Those radios, yes, they would, and we have some allocated in capital improvement. So we try to use that money first and then utilize this.
What about the mounting systems that we're waiting for the state to cover for us, that we don't know when they're going to cover?
We'll have to look into that. I don't know anything, an update on that.
So part of what we heard, I think, is that it's there's a shortage of parts for that. But the answer to the question is yes, ma'am. If we determined that we knew another vendor that we could depend on to do that, then it would come out of that account if we did that. But typically, we've always been taught as administrators, you spend money from Fed level down. So if you have an expense that you can that you can allow the state to pay for it, and that's typically what happens. The challenge in this case is that the specific thing that you're talking about is a statewide parts issue. That's not what we were told a while back, but recently that's what we're hearing now. So that it's a statewide parts issue with these brackets that are supposed to be distributed. So if we can identify a vendor, that might be something that we would prioritize. We just got to find somebody that can get them to us. But yes, ma'am, that would be an example.
Okay.
Miss English.
Oh, I'm sorry. Miss,
Yeah, I got a question. As far as the budget for the athletic area, did anyone, I think the procedures for you guys to meet with the athletic directors, was that meeting occur? Did anyone met with them for them to assist with this budget as well? For the next year for them?
So you're talking about trainers, or
let's be talking about the trainers.
are you talking about trainers, Miss English?
Not only training of the program itself, support, total for athletic program itself. Did anyone met with all the athletic directors to discuss the budget for next year?
Well, we didn't meet with them directly, but when we had the principal meetings, they talked on behalf of their ADs, the high schools did. And so we got it through their principal.
Okay, and I think that's another issue that comes about. I think that before we even, I think you guys need to meet with them, athletic directors themselves, to improve their budget for next year. Do we know whether the principals even met with them?
Well,
Go ahead.
yeah, they spoke on their behalf, so we have to.
Yeah. So typically, typically the principal and the athletic director meet to assess the needs, and then at budget meetings that are held, the principal is the one that typically makes those presentations. If we've got some additional needs that we need to look at, I mean, we can certainly do that, but typically that's the way it's AD meets with principal ahead of time. They outline the needs for the coming year, and then when the finance department sets up the meetings with principals, athletics is a part. Athletic needs are a part of that discussion. Is what typically happens.
That's great.
Okay, do you guys know that it was done that way? You know for sure that it was done that way?
And just as an aside, Ms. English, the general fund does a transfer of almost $300,000 to support athletics. And in addition to that, whenever we have bond proceeds remaining, in the fall, we dedicate, along with fine arts, an allocation for athletics as well. And I've had some conversations with some of the 80s that have wanted to talk with me about some of their things that they needed. And so we've made it happen. But I do see what you're saying as far as we depend on the principals to make sure that they are bringing their budget requests and needs for their entire school. So that is the expectation. But I do see what you're saying.
Absolutely. And I just want, I just want to make sure everything's done right. And and that's my theory, and things are not being done right. We have, issues along the way, and when I say that I wasn't involved, I don't know anything about it. We did discuss that, so that's what I want to make sure that you guys are aware of, that the principals met with these individuals, and they brought those issues, because, I've been told, that some, I'm not gonna say all, but, that, when is the meeting gonna take place for the bid report? So I just wanna, you guys to make sure, like I said, I don't wanna, go to approving a budget and it's not, everything is not been done right.
We can follow up.
We will. Yeah.
But if you guys can assure me that it was done, then,
Okay.
but that's all I want is to assure that everything's been taken care of the proper way.
All right, thank you.
So to put all these pieces together, on the next slide, it now just shows what our FY 2025 proposed budget after adjustments would be. We will start with our FY 2024 revenue base, which is 158,311,255. We have proposed increases of 5.6 million. That presents a revenue base of 163,916,000. For our expenditures, we start with our FY 2024 expenditure base, which is 158,311,000. We've identified some base year reductions to the tune of 3.4 million. We've also identified some base year increases of 1.3 million. And then we have identified the FY 2025 proposed increases of 10.7 million. That comes to an expenditure base of 167,004,789. As you can see, that is a shortfall on the next slide of about $3,088,267. As we stated, we would use some portion of fund balance to fill that gap. And as we apply that, we now have that balanced budget where the revenues and expenditures equal zero. Revenues minus expenditures equal zero. Again, we also are still holding true to the need for another allocation of fund balance to an assigned line of fund balance to the tune of $3 million for our facilities improvements and building studies. And that is now currently all I have for the FY 2025 budget and what we expect for that year.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Miss,
Yes, ma'am.
one last thing, Ms. Spearman. Okay, we have a deficit that we can address with the fund balance. However, this budget is based on the 170 million of that the Senate is saying will be the allotment. Now, if it comes in higher, because the House is at 230 million, so maybe they rest at 200. Okay. Hopefully that would be a compromise. We would actually have less of a deficit, correct?
Well, because of that of previous year's estimate, that previous year's estimate was 88 million at that time. And then the numbers came in and they adjusted it down. So if we receive 88 million for Sumter for state aid to classrooms, that would be just meeting what we already have as the budget. So there would have to be somewhat of a significant amount allocated to Sumter for the state aid to classrooms. Because we're only expected to receive 82,778,000.
And that's based on the Senate number? Or
Well, the
what we
80
received last year?
For this year's allocation.
Right,
Like
right.
the actual monies we receive every month from the state.
Right.
We're expected to receive for FY '24, $82.7 million. That budgeted number for FY '24 was 88.4 because of the estimate from the beginning of the year. So now, we would have to get upwards of additional 5.6 million or more to increase that budget line. Because I don't want to increase the base budget for 88 million until I know we can receive more than that.
Right.
And we don't currently, I don't expect that.
Nobody knows that right now.
We really don't know.
And so, if they reach a compromise that brings that number up,
Yes.
it's possible that our number will increase as well.
That's correct. It is very possible.
Okay. But you based everything on the Senate number.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right? Any other questions for Ms. Spellman? If none, Madam CFO, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. With item 4, action required. What is your pleasure regarding fiscal year 2025 budget?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
a motion to approve the FY 2024 budget as presented.
25.
Yeah, it's in here, 2024, 25.
I second the motion.
The motion and supported that we approve the budget for fiscal year 2025. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, you may vote your pleasure. You got this English.
And Mr. Zell?
Yeah.
What's your, vote, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
The budget is approved. Thank you. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen. If there are no other matters to come before us, we will close the meeting at this time. Hearing nothing, I will declare the meeting closed.